Okay, so what I want to do is I want to just show you guys a little bit of brainstorming and how you can get started with your poem. And if you notice, I have two things open on my screen. I have this Unit 10 brainstorming's topic, and I have the Unit 10 graphic organizer for slam poetry. All right? And what I would start with is I would start by asking myself these questions, and I would say to myself, which question provokes the most response from me? The most thoughts, the most ideas. And so when I browse through these questions, I am thinking about this one right here. What drives me absolutely bonkers and fascinates me at the same time. And my thoughts that pop into my head when I read this question is really the idea of learned helplessness. Have you guys heard that term before?
Yeah. No.
All right. Well, I have a lot of thoughts about learned helplessness. It's something that I've learned a lot about, and it could be something that would make a good message for other people. So I'm going to just take that idea and go with it. So I'm going to go to my next slide, and I modified this a little bit. It's a little bit different than it looked before, but I would just put in my topic here. And then it says here, make a list of random thoughts and ideas that pop into your head when you think about your topic. So when I think about learned helplessness, I think about, and I'm sorry, this might be a little harsh, but I think about students who come to me and say, I don't have a pencil.
I don't.
I think about kids who sit in their desks doing nothing because they don't have a piece of paper. I think about parents who do everything for their kids. I think about parents who don't allow their children to solve their own problems. I think about just random things. These are just random things that come to my mind when I think about my topic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then what I would do from there is I want to start right away trying to think of some figurative language, some ways that I can express these thoughts, but in more of a poetic way, in a way that is going to be catchy to my listener. Okay. So I could maybe come up with a simile. Kids sit in their desks doing nothing because they don't have a piece of paper. I could compare that to students are like these students, because it's not every student, right? These students are like sloths when it comes to getting started on work. Something like that. That doesn't exactly get across my idea, but it's a starting place. A metaphor, or could I think about some rhyming? If I think about the words that I used here, are there any words that rhyme with pencil? Stencil? Ooh, stencil might be cool. Pencil, stencil, tinsel. It's kind of a near rhyme. What about paper? Ooh, taper, shaper, stapler. Maybe, kind of rhyme. Okay. Alliteration. What are some things that I've written about that I could pair together that have the same letters at the beginning? Do you see any?
Parents and paper.
Pencil, parents, problems.
Paper.
Oh, thank you. Paper. Okay. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to gather some ideas and put them into some sort of poetic structure. Does that make sense? Once I get this done and I feel good about the poetic parts of my poem, then I would switch over here to structuring the poem. Okay? So in the beginning, what I probably want to do is I want to define learned helplessness so that my listeners know what it means, right? And maybe I want to get across the message that it's not the kid's fault. Some of my students, and I'm talking about a few of you, but not most of you, some of my students feel like they are completely helpless. They have learned to be helpless. And it's not their fault. In a lot of ways, it comes down to parenting. And so that would be maybe my next section of my poem. I would then go into how it's frustrating that, and I can find research that talks about parents solving problems for kids, right? About kids not struggling enough. And then I would go down to my next section. What do I want kids to know? I've talked about parents now. How can I then move this along into a message that would be good for my listeners to hear? Maybe my message then would turn to something about how it's time for change, time to grow up, time to take responsibility, time to stop making excuses. What do you see that I'm doing right now that's poetic? That
Or time.
repeating the word time or time too, okay? Is that something I could definitely use in my poem throughout? Could I use this throughout my poem? Right? So I'm just randomly thinking of things and plugging away. After I talk about time for change and it's time to grow up, it's time to stop making excuses, I probably would end my poem after that. So what do I want my very last message to be? Something about how sometime at some point in time kids won't have, kids will be adults. And they need to know how to solve their own problems. And as a teacher, I feel like that's my job. My job is to help you sometimes solve your own problems. My job is not to solve your problems for you. Does that make sense? So I'm just getting kind of a structure. And that's it. That's all you need to do right now. So you're coming up with your ideas here, brainstorming some thoughts and ideas about it, putting some of it into some poetic type of structures, and then moving on to this sheet and start structuring the order of your poem. Capiche?
Capiche.